All right, everyone. Welcome once again to the Faces of Business. I'm your host, Damon Pistolka, and with me today, I've got Ryan Wicklum here with me. Ryan, thanks so much for being here.
Oh, Damon, it's a pleasure, man. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, man, it's cool because we're going to be talking today about the value of sales assessments, and I really think that this is something that love to be able to highlight with people, and just talk about a few of the things that we see as you go in and do a sales assessment and what a business can really understand by getting them and how that can help them going forward. So it's going to be
Right
fun
on.
talking about that.
100%. Let's go.
Yeah. So Ryan, first of all, tell me a little bit about your background. I mean, because you didn't start out in sales, but you've done a lot of sales work going through
Yeah,
the career.
it's funny, Damon. I actually when I started out, I was going to university and I wanted to get into hotel and food administration. My
Yeah.
goal was to go to Whistler. That's what like my ultimate goal. I want to get in the ski hill. I wanted to get in that kind of that party environment. And then I had a family situation that took place. So I dropped out of university and came home to
Yeah.
take care of the bills and take care of that situation. And 4 years later, when the situation kind of came to a head, I realized I'd gone from a temp on the midnight shift of a factory, punch press,
Yeah.
to being a manager of a shift, and in the 4 years. And so I was
Wow.
pretty much knee deep in the automotive industry at that point with Magna International. And I made a decision. I thought, okay, to went back to school. Whistler was still calling my name,
Yeah.
and I thought, no, I'm gonna stick it out with automotive. I was there 13 years, and then realized that I didn't want to do this anymore. I didn't want the mandatory overtime. I didn't want the rotating shifts.
Yeah.
I wanted to start a family, so I transitioned and I joined a startup. So I went from being employee 5587 at Magna to being employee 7 at this robotics startup. I
Wow.
was there 6 years, so I kind of had the the biggest spectrum of change from
Hmm.
established, cadenced, solidified processes to no processes, and
Yeah.
establishing the supply chain within this startup. And I did that for 6 years. So in the first 20 years of my business career, I had two jobs,
Yeah.
and the whole time though, I thought I always had that personality where I wanted to get out, I wanted to explore, and I wanted to do more things, and I determined that transitioning to sales was what I wanted to do. So I kind of I went from the supply chain and operations realm into sales, and honestly, it's been a bit of a ride. I've learned a lot. I've made mistakes, but it's amazing how different it is, but at the same time, it's very similar.
Hmm.
Sales is very operational. There's a lot of process behind it, and obviously, operations and supply chain, that's process based.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things that I think, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, is your operational background really has to help in the sales setting because that process foundation is so important to get a consistent sales result.
100%. And one of the things that I try to put forth when I talk to people is that the need for a playbook of some kind, either a sales playbook or a customer experience playbook or an account management playbook, is so drastically important because as you add salespeople, if they're if they have the same goal but they're doing things differently, you don't really know how to assess them, and you don't
Yeah.
know how to what do you how do you change them, or do you want to change them?
Yeah.
What's working, what's not working? But if it's constantly moving, as a sales manager, you're looking at and it's you're almost trying to kick a field goal through goalposts that are moving
Yeah.
because there's nothing static, and there's nothing that is solidified and established. And a playbook kind of does that. A playbook slows down the goalpost.
Yeah, that's for sure. And you God, there's a lot in there. Let's just back up. Let's just back up
Sure.
a second because you talk about process in sales. And this is
Yes.
one of the things that I think a lot of manufacturers have some challenge with because honestly they are still a fair amount of the manufacturing base is still using people on the road talking to
Yeah.
customers type of sales. And that from years ago and 20 years ago when hell when I was selling
Yeah.
manufacturing products, no one talked about a playbook. No one talked about sales process. You just had good salespeople that they could sell or they weren't, and that's how they succeeded or
Right,
failed.
right.
And one thing you touched on in there that's so important is as we've developed the sales skill set overall and what's successful in sales, the need for this underlying process to drive consistency amongst the whole team of salespeople to be able to measure has gone from virtually non-existent to almost a barrier to entry, or a you need it to get in the event anymore.
100%. Well, we used to, and obviously I've been in business 25 years. So I remember having conversations with salespeople from Magna, and being on the buying side too. I'd seen a lot of salespeople trying to sell me things.
Yeah.
And it used to be that, there was two considerations. There was, you were either selling your product or you're selling yourself, right?
Mhm.
If a salesperson had that kind of charisma and they could sell, and the product was good, you formed that relationship, and there was almost like a bond, and it encouraged a lot of long-term relationship thinking.
Yeah.
What's happened now is that because of the kind of transition to virtual sales, because of the pandemic and for other reasons too, I think a lot of the situation is a lot of these buyers that used to work are now either retiring or they're moving on to different careers, like myself. Like I did
Yeah.
operations 20 years, and now I'm in sales. But what's happening is there's a new breed of buyer
Yep.
that is being established, and they're younger, they're more tech savvy, they are they're perfectly willing to do more research ahead of time. So sales actually gets involved later in the sales cycle
Yeah.
than it used to. It used to be that that sales would get involved, 40%, 42%. And now the latest stats say that it's 56 to 60% of the way through. So a buyer is already doing the journey all the way up to 56 to 60%. And then they're realizing, okay, they're doing the research into all the different potential companies to work with.
Yeah.
And they're inviting salespeople to come for these 20-minute meetings stacked upon each other. And there's a set criteria, and they're assessing the companies based upon their presentation, but also their website, because
Yeah.
that's the first thing that sings out about a company is a site now. And then they're actually gauging, you know, your 20 minutes that you're given or 30 minutes as the case might be, is actually your entry point to have
Mhm.
further discussions. Because if you don't impress them in the 20, 30 minutes, they've already done research into your competitors.
Yeah.
These meetings are not exploratory anymore. They're more verification meetings because they've already done all the research.
Yeah. Yeah. This is I'm gonna write a couple of notes down because you bring up again, there are several just stellar points that you brought up here. First of all, the new breed of buyer. And
Yeah,
I talk about this a lot. And actually it's started a couple of years ago. I was talking about this already, even pre-pandemic, even as I think about it, the buying age now, it's not people our age that are typically
right.
buying anymore. It's people that are in their 20s and 30s, right? Those people grew up with a smartphone in hand, and every time they wanted something,
That's
they
right.
just on get the old phone, find it on Google, and go ahead and do what you're going to do then. And that has replaced the vast majority of people that are buying, or there's still obviously some older folks in there, but they're not nearly as many.
That's right.
And it it has just changed the landscape, and literally to the point that you could be an incumbent supplier,
Yep.
great product, and if your salespeople are not adapting to the way the buyer buys, you might lose the business just because you don't have a good website, even though you're doing what you're supposed to be doing.
100%. And the next step of that kind of line of thinking is envision the tools that they have at their disposal now,
Yeah,
right? It used to be that, when I was buying, I had an Excel sheet with all of my bill of materials.
yeah,
I had options A, B, and C as to where I could buy them from and the different pricing. And I could gauge, who to buy from. But now there's such a vast amount of information available that you need to not only worry about what you're selling now, but how you sold in the past and
yeah,
customer reviews, and
yeah,
and actually how they treat employees. A buyer can go on Glassdoor and they can check information about, what the employees think about working with you. So if
Yeah.
there's negative reviews on Glassdoor about, company ABC, company ABC is in trouble because nobody's going to want to work with them.
Yeah.
Because the assumption is that if it's bad to work there, it's going to be bad to work with.
Yeah, that's a great point. If it's bad to work there, it's probably going to be bad to work with.
Right.
I got to write that down. That
It's
is
yours.
that is so great.
It's yours, man.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Because I mean, really, it is a 360-degree view of companies anymore as from a new breed of buyers perspective, right?
Absolutely.
Because you can not show enough community involvement. You can or show too much community involvement or the wrong type of involvement and stuff.
Yep.
This all makes a difference now, and buyers expect, not they,
Right.
just buyers expect that they can find out a lot about your company, both on your website, and they understand too that your website, you control the information on there.
Right.
So they're going to look for third-party places of verification where you can go. Social media, like you said, Glassdoor would be another one.
Yep.
What kind of reviews do you have on Google? What kind of reviews do you have on, if you're on a Facebook kind of thing? What kind of interactions are you doing on your social media platforms?
Oh,
All
and
this.
they can mobilize, Damon. That's the issue. Is it not only is that, but they can mobilize forces so quickly, but by social media, that I could be, as a seller, I could have the most pristine presentation, and I could answer all the questions, do all my research, and give them generally a very positive experience. But if a colleague of mine goes on social media and says something wrong politically,
Yeah.
then there's no way that they're gonna buy from me.
Yeah.
So not only are you controlling, you're controlling yourself, you're having to look around and make sure that everyone else is in alignment too. And
Wow.
it really is, all the leverage has transitioned from, it used to be the leverage had was with the seller because they can control the narrative, and the leverage is completely with the buyer now because they have research and money.
Yeah.
Right. And it's amazing how you almost have to cater the delivery of the message and the cadence of the message to the buyer persona. And there's a lot of there's a lot more impetus on finding out about buyer personas and customer avatars, all these things, because it can't be the same messaging for every single
Yeah.
entry point to a company. You're going to have, you not only are you going to have the alignment between entry point of executives or directors, or kind of a, what you call the coal facing masses, so to speak, but it's different personalities too. Is your buyer introverted? Are they extroverted? Are they very technical? Are they charismatic? Like, you have to really cater every single message to every single persona, and do a good job of aligning the messaging with the receiver.
Yeah. Yeah. That's huge. That's huge. And because it has to speak to them. And again, it's because they hold the cards.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We got David Chrysler stop by. Thanks, David. Great seeing you this afternoon. So we, God, there's just a lot in this, because backing up a little bit, when you were talking about these 20-minute meetings,
Yeah.
that's a first that I've heard of that. I'm not in the type of business anymore where you've got multiple suppliers usually that you're going head to head.
Mhm.
But man, that really changes the game.
Oh, sure it does, because you've transitioned, like the way that obviously I think we grew up doing business was more on the personality side, and
Mm-hmm.
if someone were to come to see me, for example, when I was buying, I'd have someone arrange a meeting. They'd come in with some samples potentially. We go for lunch, we form a relationship, and then because they'd be looking to kind of, it was almost a sign of respect that you got, out of your seat, got on a plane or drove to my facility
Yeah.
and came to see me. And that's kind of gone away, because not only has the pandemic taken away a lot of that transportation, but a lot of the buyers don't even want that. Like,
Yeah.
they don't want you to come visit, because first off, there is no office to visit in a lot of cases. And secondly, they're either working from home or they have other things in the go, and there's so many more considerations that they have, especially from a supply chain standpoint. There's more problems than there used to be
Yeah.
with these supply chain shortages, with employment shortages, in Asia and Europe and parts of the U.S., and all these different obstacles that a supply chain person has to overcome to
Hmm.
have materials come into the facility. You coming in and wanting to spend time with them that isn't necessarily conducive to getting a decision made. They don't
Yeah.
want that.
Yeah.
You almost become an annoyance if you show up.
Yeah. And that you're 100% there, because I think that as we've tried to get more efficient in our
Hmm.
businesses and expected more from our people just because of global competition and the desire to run better companies, it definitely has limited the ability to take the time to build those kind of relationships
Yeah,
with a supplier.
and don't get me wrong. There are situations in which you still need to make those relationships. For
Yes.
example, if you are a cybersecurity company, and your main relationship is at AWS or Microsoft or whoever it is that you're using to as your cloud-based support, then ultimately you need to form a great relationship, because any stoppage, any interruption to that service, and your entire company goes down.
Yeah.
So if your bill of materials is essentially is one, then yes, you're going to take the time to form those relationships. Whereas if you're buying 500 things and they go into a robot or a car or anything like that, for sure, like you need to assess, what are your strategic accounts and what are your strategic suppliers, and then then those people selling those products will get more time, obviously,
Yeah.
because they
Yeah.
can't afford the interruptions.
Yeah. Well, and part of this too is we haven't talked about it much yet, and we'll get into it as we talk about sales playbook and just the sales assessments. But this really, what you're saying, what you're talking about, the buyer's journey now, these
Yeah,
20-minute meetings. I mean, and then you talk about the critical nature of the component they're talking about and how much time they're willing to spend with you to build a relationship. Man, when you think of that and put that together, if I'm selling common items like
yeah,
sheet metal, wood, bulk wood product,
yeah.
fasteners,
Fasteners.
plastics, anything like that, the importance of being able to sell that almost like an e-commerce. I'm buying a teddy bear off of Amazon. Uh, if they know what they want, is almost undeniable. The advantage of that.
Well, you have to recognize, you have to almost like you have to know your role. If you're
Yeah.
selling fasteners and you have a great e-commerce site, and like take Fastenal for example, like not to say go to Fastenal or not go to Fastenal, but with Fastenal, there's a great site. You have every single kind of fastener you could possibly want, and they'll come deliver it for you,
Yeah.
and they'll do the VMI.
Yeah.
So if you try to deepen that relationship, we try to talk to purchasers and you try to think, okay, what else is there that we can get in? Ultimately, it's just going to go against you, and eventually they'll go somewhere else,
Yeah.
right? So you kind of want to know your role and find your niche in that bill of materials. And if you can recognize that it is, somewhat limited the effect that you have on them, if you had a shortage of any kind, then just understand that, embrace that, get in, get out, and then
Yeah.
get that consistent delivery. Don't give them a reason to go anywhere else,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned one thing though, shortage, and that's your opportunity. Your opportunity is to build the relationship there, is to solve the problems when they have problems as a salesperson or a customer service
You know what,
person.
Damon? I've always thought that sales is I say it's half doctor and half trail guide, because ultimately you are the first half of your time you're solving problems, you're taking pain away, and the second half is that you're guiding them to a solution,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if you have that mindset where you're what role are you playing at a certain time? Are you the doctor or are you the trail guide?
Yeah.
And if you get them wrong, then it's not going to work out for you. But if you align it and you act the right role at the right time with the right people, it actually goes really, really well, and there's not a lot of interruptions, and it's pretty smooth. But
Yeah.
I think salespeople, you understand that you're just taking pain away, whatever pain it is. Even if you have a sales meeting and you're asking, okay, what's hurting right now, Ryan? And if I answer, if the other person might answer, well, I know, Ryan, you want to talk about what you're selling, but we have big problems in finance right now. Then I'm gonna drop the initial inquiry of my reason for the meeting. I might help them find a finance person.
Yeah.
Right. Or I might help get them some help, because ultimately that's the quickest way to get from A to B. A is current state and B is trusted advisor.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if I'm not selling a financial service, that's okay, because I've taken pain away, and they'll remember that I've been a doctor.
Yeah.
Right. And I've been that trusted person that they can go back to for other questions. And
And you
eventually
can,
it'll get around to what I sell.
yeah, exactly. And you've helped them through those problems. So
Absolutely.
they remember that. People
Sure.
remember that when you take the time to do what's right and really help them.
100%.
Yeah. That's awesome. So it's interesting to me that you wanted to go into hospitality and be up in Whistler. It's a place I love. It's
Yeah.
one of the most fantastic places I've found in North America to ski. Even though I've skied a lot in Colorado and other places, it's just, and of course here in Washington too. But that's just a fantastic place. What drew you there?
Well, so I grew up in a small town of 250 people in Northern Ontario here in Canada.
Okay.
And to me, it just seemed like a place I wanted to go. And I think I always knew, okay, I'm going to make some mistakes. And I rather would make them in Whistler than, north of Toronto. Right. So I figured that was the appeal. The appeal was I kind of wanted to increase my scope,
Yeah.
because I grew up, a 20-minute bus ride from my school. And then went to high school, which was across the road from my public school. And I had the same friends since grade 3.
Yeah.
And I played sports with the same people all the time. I kind of wanted to just let loose and go somewhere where no one knew me
Mm-hmm.
and I could just explore, because that was, and I figured I was gregarious and outgoing, extroverted. And I thought maybe, hospitality was the way to go. So it's funny how, that situation I referred to previously changed the trajectory of who I was, because looking at it now, if I was in hospitality, where would I be? I'd
Yeah.
probably be in sales.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I
So,
mean, you ended up kind of probably in a similar place. It's just
right.
a little different geographical location. So are you a skier then?
It's funny. I grew up about 5 minutes from two, well, big for Northern Ontario, snow
Yeah.
hills. And I think I've been on skis 3 times.
Okay.
But
Okay.
I just love the idea. Like I'm a cold weather guy. I love the crisp air,
Yeah.
and yeah, and I thought maybe I'll go out there, maybe I'll learn to ski.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm sure I'll get it for free as I
Yeah.
work
Yeah.
there, right? So I
Yeah.
just love the idea. Like I love to cook. I love food. So it seemed like a great place to start my business career, was to go out there and kind of spread my wings, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And then I ended up, within, I think it was a 7-day transition from going to my second year of university in hotel and food administration, and then being a temp on the midnight shift
Yeah.
at a punch press,
Yeah.
making $8.50 an hour, right?
Yeah.
And on the midnight shift too. It wasn't even on like a glorious shift. It was on midnight shift. So
Yeah.
it's funny how life takes you a certain path, and you do it, and then you learn from it, and you make your mistakes, and you celebrate your wins, and you move on.
Well, yeah. And I think, man, the more people I talk to and the more life I live, that it just, all those little things, and that,
Yeah.
sometimes it's a real pain in the butt, the situations we have to go through. But when you look back at it and you go, would I really change it? And
Exactly.
that's the thing. And I talk to so many people and I think about because we've all had bad things happen in our life as you get older. It just is
Yeah.
inevitable, right?
It's inevitable. Yeah.
But would you want to change them? And I look back and my life, and I talk to other people, and most of them say, yeah, it kind of stunk, but I don't think I'd want to change it because I wouldn't be right here today.
Well, I think change is inevitable, and I think it's just a matter if it's seismic or tectonic, right? I think
Good point.
some change happens gradually, and there's almost like a tectonic shift as you
Yeah.
go, and some things are seismic and they happen instantaneously.
Yeah.
And you either, so you either kind of gradually change your path, or your path blows up and you figure
Hmm.
out another path to blaze, right? So yeah, but change is inevitable. I think if you fight change, it just gets more, you almost become salmon, kind of upstream, right? Whereas if you just embrace the fact that change is going to happen and you kind of ride the wave, or embrace the current, using that analogy, I think you'll get to the spot that you intended to be. Just keep learning, keep living, and I think that eventually the lessons that you learn will shape who you were meant to be in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's true. And I think, I don't know, the more I read about personal development, the more I think about it. We won't get on this much because I could go on in a while. I
Right.
think that's true. I think it's true. I think there, if we have a general idea of where we want to go and keep focusing on that general idea, the path is going to change.
Yeah.
But as we keep focusing in on where we really want to go, and as we get a little older and really understand what that looks like, we do end up there in the end.
Well, I think my father once told me, he said, Ryan, it's okay to regret. That's natural. That's human. The problem is when you dwell. Is it when
Mm,
you dwell on something, that's where you get bogged down, and the negativity kind of seeps in. But it's okay to think, well, why I wish I didn't do that, and then move
yeah.
on to the next thing, right? And learn from it, because I think mistakes are almost like, if you dwell in it, it stays a mistake. If you kind of move on, the mistake becomes an opportunity to learn,
Yeah.
right? But the mistake will stick
Hmm.
with you, and you always think, oh, well, I shouldn't have done that. If you keep dwelling on it, it can just kind of eats away at you. Whereas if you regret, you learn, you move on, you apologize if you need to, and then that's it, right? And
Yeah.
on to the next thing.
Yeah. Wise words, man. Wise words. Because it
Sometimes
is, it's always, I mean, because it is, mistakes are going to happen.
they're going to happen.
And if they're made with good intentions, yeah, you just got to learn from them, move on.
100%.
So, coming back again to when you, started helping people with sales assessments, and this is
Yeah.
something that I think is really pretty interesting, in the fact that a lot of companies have never considered what a sales assessment could do for them,
Right.
and how it could help. So when and we talked about this, I believe, before we got on, or as we started here, but don't quite remember. But the fact that while sales is constantly changing, just like manufacturing or supply chain or logistics or software technology, no matter what your industry you're in, or medical,
Yeah.
we often look at sales as a static thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, we have salespeople and we're selling stuff. Um, how do sales assessments really help you to change your viewpoint of that, and kind of view it as something that we're working on, like a manufacturing process, you think?
Yeah. Well, I think the reason that you would do a sales assessment is to, if you understand you need to change. If you don't want to change, then you're not going to assess anything. You think everything's cool, you're gonna keep it the way it is, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the trap that some companies get into, because it's going relatively well. They don't have too much in the way of disruption. They've had some generally positive feedback from employees and from customers, so they're kind of cool with the way they're at, and they're
Yeah.
cool with status quo. I think the companies that want to almost get under this vibe of continuous improvement, they understand change is inevitable, like you said, and they're going to embrace it. And I think that if you look at your typical kind of change management process, you have, sales assessment kind of happens in that first phase where you're preparing your organization for change, and you're one of the biggest kind of byproducts is understanding the need for change,
Hmm.
and to really kind of back that need for change up, you need to assess what current state is,
Hmm.
right? And then you go up further, you get to, you craft your vision, you plan for change, your implementation plan, etc. But you need to have a good definition of what current state is first. And I think
Yeah.
that's where a sales assessment really does, a good job, because it allows you to map out your journey and map out
Yeah.
your decision points and what resources you need, etc. And as humans who contribute to, obviously, to company success, you we spend a lot of time focusing on what's right, but we don't want to face what's wrong.
Yeah.
And what's wrong is not often discussed. And an assessment of anything, in this case, a sales org, will unearth the things that are wrong. And from a standpoint of process or strategy or people, but also from an outlook standpoint. And oftentimes you find misalignment between what people think success is, or what a sales org does, or the process involved, or or how to do things. And I think that, if your frontline people think one thing, and your director thinks another thing, and your VP thinks another thing, doing a current state sales assessment will unearth, who thinks what and why. And it kind of allows you to get to, unearth those things that need to get the pain
Yeah.
points. Once you determine the pain points, then you can kind of use them as an opportunity to engage your employees into finding solutions. And there's two massive benefits. The first one is vulnerability and leadership, because if there's a pain point involved and leadership says, yeah, you know what, we need some help, that shows that they're human, and the distance, or the perceived distance between the two positions, lessens.
Mm-hmm.
And the second benefit is employee empowerment, because you're basically saying, okay, we recognize that there's a need for this, there's a pain point. Leadership says, yeah, we need some help. And if you can give your employees enough empowerment or autonomy to help with the change, then that's a massive step. And I think that
Yeah.
involving them in the sales assessment in the first place shows that, you give a crap about what they think.
Yeah. Yeah. How many times do you go in a sales assessment and find that you get about, if you ask people what they think about, the company or sales, or that the answers you get are aligned well? How many times do you come in and see that they're aligned well?
0%. Like
Yeah.
there's always at least one thing, and usually, quite a number of things
Yeah.
that are different. And there's many reasons why. Like, ultimately, there are a lot of situations and a lot of aspects of sales where, say, a VP of sales doesn't want to show certain things. But if you're doing this full, pardon my phrasing, but open kimono
Yeah.
assessment, then those things are unearthed very quickly.
Yeah.
That's part of the vulnerability that I mentioned. If you basically say, okay, if a VP of sales or sales director says, yes, we know that this is not in alignment with our stated process or our playbook, as an example, then it shows, okay, they're vulnerable. They admit that they were wrong. They admit there's a gap, and there needs to be this kind of come together moment where they build a bridge together. Because
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, it's your frontline people that are going to be performing the process.
Yeah.
So if there's no full buy-in, especially in today's day and age, when you have these massive, amount of open sales recs, and there's turnover. So, sales employee retention and sales employee recruitment become such a massive aspect of these assessments. You don't want to tick off the people that are going to be performing sales, because you might not find somebody readily,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So involve them, empower them, give them autonomy, listen to them, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's why, when I do an assessment, I want everybody involved there,
Yeah.
because it's not just someone throwing down some things they think. There's an actual conversation involved.
Mm-hmm. Well, David talked a little bit about David Chrysler's here comment again about vulnerability and leadership is huge. And I agree 100%. And when you look at companies that understand this and make that transition from top down leadership to bottom up leadership, and really empowering those people, the changes they can make are really pretty staggering.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And,
When
and I think that, and one of the things, Damon, that's really important is understanding that a sales assessment that's done properly is wide ranging. And
Mhm.
it's not just about alignment, because you're not just saying, okay, does our sales org align with our mission, values, goals,
Yeah.
etc. You're looking at things, and typically there's four buckets that you're looking at. You're looking at strategy, people, process, and technology, and you're assessing all four, and you're assessing like you're basically saying, okay, you ask whatever questions. Let's say you have 40, 50 questions, and they're separated into four categories. You're trying to find out, okay, what are the things that need to get fixed right now? What are phase two? What are phase three? But obviously, you're probably going to nurse some pretty big fires. For
Yeah.
example, if a company doesn't have a CRM or isn't using the CRM properly, then typically, what you'll find that there's a bunch of information in a bunch of different places.
Yeah.
And what makes it worse is when an employee might leave and they take with them a lot of the information.
Yeah.
And then, you go to re-up with a customer, and the customer says, well, I told that employee 6 months ago that we're moving on, and we weren't going to work with your company anymore. Well, that affects a lot of things. That affects, you have
Yeah.
a perceived gap in your pipeline because you think
Yeah.
that's a recurring revenue that's now gone,
Yeah.
right? And it affects the person in that territory, and it affects people's sales compensation, and it affects operational aspects because
Mm-hmm.
you have the sales part of SNOP planning. If
Mm-hmm.
now your pipeline says that you are now 10% less because the company dropped you, then you need 10% less resources theoretically, which means that purchasing needs to know to order 10% less of something,
Yeah.
right? So it affects all the operational aspects of inventory on hand and human resourcing on the side of the operations team,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it affects the sales decisions that are made, and the holes in the sales org or gaps that are there for filling have a just trickle down effect on the entire company.
Yeah.
And I know that people don't want to hear this, but everyone in the company does sales.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
It's a
Yes.
very unpopular opinion because they don't think that some people have a stigma of sales, that there's the sales acts a certain way, and they think certain things, but ultimately it's all connected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's for sure. And you brought up one thing, and I want to say hello to Matthew. Thanks for being here today, Matthew. And he also says he's not using his CRM properly. And it's funny you put a comment up about the CRMs because,
Right.
man, that is such a great example there of something that the importance of using the right technology.
Absolutely.
Because, and we talked about e-commerce, we talked about other things earlier, but the companies that are really leveraging good technology to help their salespeople make it easier for their salespeople and their customer service people, any customer facing people, to have much better, higher quality conversations
Absolutely.
with their customers and prospects in my mind.
Sure.
And how do you think that is just that simple step of having a decent CRM working helps most companies when you over your opinion and what you've seen?
Yeah. So I think that when assessing the viability or availability of a CRM, I think you're looking at five things. You're looking at intelligence, enablement, engagement, analytics, and coaching, because all those things contribute to a successful use. Like you are
Yeah.
not only is a CRM, yes, you can use them just to um, enable or make a process cadenced and consistent. But there's many things you can do with them. You can store documents there, for example,
Yeah.
and that way they're right at the ready during a to put into an email sequence.
Mm-hmm.
You can use it for email automation. You can use it for reporting. You can use it for all these things, because the alternative to a CRM is either it's one of two things. Is either on this side it's a part of an ERP, or it's Excel
Yeah.
or another database.
Excel and Outlook basically, because
Yeah,
it's just sitting in your email
100%.
or yeah.
Yeah, and if you're using that kind of method, then it's not live, it's not
Mm-hmm.
vibrant. It has no real kind of relevance, because you can't really take that. You can take that reporting or the information and create a report, but it's more of a snapshot.
Yeah.
in time, and you can't really use it to assess performance because so much has happened between the development of the report and the actual meeting between a sales manager and a sales employee.
Yeah.
Things have changed dramatically potentially. So to have that CRM in place and have that centralized customer database and create that engagement with both your customer and with your team is really important. And I think that to really if you can show how valuable having a good CRM is, you'll get a lot more buy-in from your team, and they'll put the information that you need as a manager or as a sales leader in the CRM, and they'll do a lot more updating of their
Yeah.
sales calls, and they'll document information that if they're not engaged, they just won't do that, and then you'll struggle because everything becomes manual and becomes like a very archaic and very frictional process.
Yeah. And you make just a plethora of great points in there because, and I was just grinning because, man, the solid gold information is flowing from you. And you don't even realize how much there's coming out probably, but it's cool because this is one of the things that I've come to realize over the last year or so, talking to people about different systems around CRM kind of applications, and they're wide ranging, obviously, but because when you look at, hey, I manufacture street sweepers, I have a much different customer support and sales support requirements through my distribution channels
Sure.
and my repairs, compared to somebody that's selling straight up a product. But what these systems give you is intelligence and
Yeah.
in real-time intelligence, because if Damon knows this customer great, but Damon gets hit by a bus, or Damon's off with his family doing vacation or
100%.
can't
Yep.
talk, someone else can answer the phone and they can go, Ryan, I see you just placed an order with us. Do you have a question about that order? Here's this are you talking about this piece of equipment you bought? How can I help you with that? Because I've got a manual here for it. It's just like,
Yep.
man, that when you put them together right, it gives you such an advantage that helps your sales and your customer service team create that experience that really separates you completely from your competitors.
Yeah, and I'll be perfectly frank, and I think that it's important to kind of be full disclosure about this point is that I'm in the midst of transitioning myself.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty confident that what I left um, when I kind of made my final foray into our CRM is a good snapshot of all of the people that I was talking to.
Yeah.
The information is there. Um, Opinions are there. Like I said, okay, listen, this is a good candidate, bad candidate. They know what stage of the sales process that they're in. Um, I got as much information as I could through assessments and through discovery calls. So when someone comes in after me and they want to talk to company ABC, and they see the company ABC, it's all outlined. They're 200 employees. Their revenue is 10 million. Here's what I talked to the director of sales. Here's what he said. Here's his pain points now, right? It's almost like a respect that
Yeah.
when you do leave a company, you're leaving in good hands. And
Yeah.
especially if you can make that one step further and you can make introductions as you leave a company, or if you don't, like you mentioned about the bus number. Yeah, if I get hit by a bus and I didn't leave kind of my own volition, then what would they do?
Yeah.
They'd have to kind of have the same conversations over because I
Hmm.
didn't update my CRM properly.
Yeah.
But because I did, they were in a good spot, and I was pretty happy that I could leave them,
That's awesome.
in that position as opposed to kind of leaving them in lurch when
Yeah.
I resigned.
And that's a great example. It's a great example, Ryan. And David just reiterates what I was saying. He said we need a bigger shovel to grab that gold.
Dave's being nice. I appreciate that.
Thanks so much. And it's funny too, because Matthew said something about his goal is to use his CRM to keep all the client info in one place. So if they can't reach their normal point of contact, they still
Yep.
get help from an informed staff member. And that's what I really have seen is like, man, and you gave a great example because you're moving on and doing something else that people can just pick right up where you left off and not have those
Yep.
to have all those conversations. Because on the customer side, it's like, hey, I don't really want to have these conversations again. I have to get my work done and get my business going just like I did the day before.
Well, and it goes back to those 20-minute meetings, right? If you already have these, I use 20 minutes as a kind of a number that I think is relevant, but it might be 30, 40, whatever it is. But you have a lot less time than you used to. So if a company that you are representing has to go back and have the same conversation, the buyer might just say, listen, like, I've already moved on.
Yeah.
I did the research. I bought for your competitor.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a lot of bridges burned along the way. And I think you want to be respectful when you do leave. And part of respecting your position as any kind of sales employee or a sales leader is updating the CRM. And it's not just the employee, it's also the sales management, because feedback is given.
Mm-hmm.
And you're using the CRM to develop reporting. And if the reports are in there to use as learning tools, for example, or if a sales leader works with the marketing team to get a refresh of the white papers or other collateral that are in the CRM, you create more effectiveness for your team.
Yeah.
Right. If a salesperson has to go through and dig through the company artifacts or dig basically like the proverbial basement of a company to find white papers and case studies and customer testimonials, then it becomes a lot more difficult. But if it's in a CRM and it's ready and available, I can have a conversation with you right now, and I can bring up some white papers that I've established, right? And that it shows credibility and it shows preparation. And
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of buyers respect that they'll get the information that they requested, readily, as opposed to having to wait hours, days, weeks for that information.
Yeah, because again, it's just like in these cases, many times it's who's ever the most top of mind are the people that can get it, or whoever gets the answer first.
Absolutely
is going to get the business. And a lot of that plays true in almost any industry, even with terribly expensive purchases, if there's competition in it.
100%. And it's all about, it boils down to alignment. Everything does. And not just alignment in like department alignment, where that's more of like a vertical alignment, but the horizontal alignment between your process indicators, your KPIs, your financial indicators. Like these are all things that are in alignment too. And in the CRM or anything that any part of your tech stack, whether it be CRM or email automation or whatever it is, needs to, cement that alignment and not fight it. Right.
Yeah. Well, man, we could talk a long time, because we just talked about a couple little topics in the whole sales assessment process. Right. But man, it has really been great to talk to you, just because, Ryan, you're such a wealth of knowledge in this, and I'm really excited to get to know you more, see what's on the next when you can announce that to us, and also just to understand more about how you're going to help the next companies do what they need to do in their sales organizations. Because, man, it's very apparent listening to you that you've gone through a lot of these assessments, and you understand how to diagnose and what pieces to adjust in these sales organizations.
Right. And I encourage everybody. I know that we just touched on some things and because the conversation kind of flowed that way, but I encourage everybody, reach out on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to connect even for a conversation. Cool. If people have a question specifically about a certain part of a sales assessment, or they want to know more about the theory behind it or the practice, I'd be happy to have conversations. I love people, so I'd be happy to do so.
Very cool. Well, thanks, Ryan. And we got Matthew says thanks, man. We appreciate you listening.
Thanks, Matt.
And it's so awesome to have you. David, thanks for being here today. Everyone else that was listening, didn't comment, thanks so much for being here. Ryan Wicklum talking about the value of sales assessments. Thanks so much for being here, man.
Damon, it's a pleasure, man. Listen, anytime.
Yeah, awesome. Well, if someone wants to get a hold of you, Ryan, it is get a hold of you on LinkedIn. Reach out to connect with Ryan Wicklum, Wicklum,
right on.
And connect with him on LinkedIn, and you will not be disappointed.
Oh, I appreciate that, man. I appreciate that, Damon. Listen, have a great one, and I'll come in at any time.
You bet. Thanks so much, everyone. Now, Ryan, just hold on for a second. We're going to sign off for now, and we'll be back again Thursday. And man, can you believe it already? Next week is the week before Christmas, or the
I
week
know.
of Christmas, isn't it? Actually, the 25th is on Saturday or something like
It's
that.
crazy.
Or yeah, I don't even know. It's so crazy to me anymore. But thanks so much, everyone. And we'll be back again on Thursday.